Okay. So, the order of operations here. I'll talk about the case debate, my case. Then I'll talk about the spending disadvantage. And then lastly, the state's counter plan with the federalism of it. Everyone ready? The first argument my opponent made to the case was that there is a shortage of superintendents. He read 2 cards about this. However, what I think that he wouldn't know is that superintendents don't require PhDs, and that there can be exceptions made for master's students or people with master's degrees that have qualified credentials for becoming superintendents. So it's not that there's a lack of qualified applicants, it's that there's not enough seeking the positions now. And this is a problem that's descriptive of the status quo. Schools are not an attractive enough option to become superintendents of because they're symptoms of a disadvantaged system which structures economically favorable conditions on one side of the aisle and those economically disadvantaged on the other. Those jobs clearly aren't viable or attractive to people who are qualified, which is why they don't seek them. Our plan would change all that, turning it on its head, providing more funding, more support, more social services to make the most educational systems possible. Those jobs have become more attractive. And according to all my professors, there are surpluses of PhD candidates who right now have no job opportunities. I think it would be a good opportunity to affirm the plan and provide more solid jobs in the future, especially those that can influence the livelihood of our nation for years to come. The next argument is that there's not enough data on community schools. I beg to differ. Our coalition of community schools evidence was written 6 years after his piece of evidence in 2001 that has collected data. If you remember from the first affirmative constructive, I said that we did a project with 50 schools and over 200 schools applied, and all of the data from those schools came back positive. That people ate better, they had better health care, they focused on school more, and their test scores actually increased. Even though some of these measurements were flawed because of the No Child Left Behind Act and actually rigged the system so they could never improve, they even improved on systems that were rigged against them. Now the spending disadvantage. First, I think he's in a double bind here. His first piece of evidence said we're spending money now to get our way out of the deficit, and his second piece of evidence says if we spend any more at all, the economy will collapse. So either we're spending money now and the economy's in trouble because we cannot go back to the debt bake where we are unwelcome, or spending is important, we have to pick the most important things to spend money on. One of those, I think, would be to have a smart educational system that can provide stability in years to come. Second, focusing on education would be good for our workforce in the future. The more stable jobs, the better workforce opportunity we have means that the only way we can avoid an inevitable economic crisis, one much worse than this financial one, is to have a good workforce. Also, students in poverty are much more expensive to educate. This is Hutchinson News 2009. Nearly 40% of Kansas students qualify for free or reduced lunches, up from 32.5% a decade ago. These are students from households that are 200% or less of the poverty line. For example, with the cost of food fast outstripping federal subsidies for free and reduced price lunches, districts with large economically disadvantaged populations select to foot a growing bill which cuts into the money available for educational products that would enrich all students. So the money we're spending now is actually more because we target assistance for low-income people when we could be addressing the core of the problem to free up funds so that we can focus on our economy later. Also, the U.S. economy is strong and can remain strong even with large deficits. Brookings Papers in 2007. The United States is a vibrant, innovative economy. Its demographics differ markedly from those of other rich countries. The United States has a comparative advantage in a globalized market in producing marketed securities and exchange low-risk debt for higher-risk equity. It is not surprising that savers around the world would want to put growing portions of their savings in the U.S. economy. The next argument was the state's counterclaim. First, I don't think this is mutually exclusive at all. You could do both. The federal government and the states could simultaneously fund schools for community schools. This means that we would have double the number of community schools and we'd solve even better. Also, I think this would set up a form of cooperative federalism where there's no longer a struggle between federal and state power. They could cooperate on the issue, which means the federalism argument would be irrelevant. Also, this is kind of ridiculous. The 50 state governments rarely act all together at the same time. The only example I can think of is driver's license. The barcode on the back, they all have the same. Otherwise, they all come up with their own policies, they're all different, they're all chaotic, and each one can be good, but if we have one size-fits-all solution at our hands that we have empirical proof for, then I say we go with that, and the only way you can do that is by voting affirmative. Also, the United States federal government must play a strong role. It's up to the federal government, not the states. This is Georgetown Journal on Poverty Law and Policy, spring '05. States could be required to spend certain proportions of the state education budget on certain social services and after-school extracurricular activities for highly at-risk low-income children. To effectuate nationwide implemental services of full-service schools, the federal government must exert some degree of control because political incentives to spend money on low-income children are not always strong. Last, he says on federalism, he couldn't answer my argument in cross-ex that Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security are always going to bring up these questions of who has the right to social services. And unless he does anything about that, I say we focus on poverty, we focus on economic disadvantages, and we affirm the plan.
All right, so your argument on the case is that there is enough data because we've looked at 50 schools, and even though that data is modified by No Child Left Behind, that should be good enough.
Well, I'm saying that the results shouldn't have been showing improvements. Good enough results would have been to show stagnation because the way the No Child Left Behind system is rigged, it's rigged against low-income families.
Let's just ask the broader question. Why does No Child Left Behind necessarily measure the community involvement that your 1AC says is necessary to invoke better scores?
Well, our evidence says that it looks at the wrong data. It looks at things like test scores that are harder. Okay.
But isn't that the standard that's still used by the 1AC?
Okay, no, our evidence goes beyond that. It says other signs of improvements have been demonstrated. My argument was that even bad standards show improvements. The coalition evidence actually gave 4 reasons right here. It says student learning, family engagement, school effectiveness, community vitality, all of which were based on studies of those 50 schools.
Okay, good deal. The fiscal discipline disadvantage. You say that the focus on education will be good for the economy in the future. Now, these children that are most likely helped by this program of the 1AC, how are they going to work their way into the workforce? Is it the idea that they go to college and then move into programs?
It could very well be that they go to college. Either way, it starts with a good high school education, good elementary school education.
So best case scenario, let's say the plan's implemented in 2 years, these kids would then be out of school in, let's say, 15, if it was the best economic position they could get themselves into. We're talking about helping the economy 20 years down the road then?
I think it could start immediately. If the program, once the program is implemented, which they had over 200 schools ready to switch on a dime for an experimental program, which means in less than a year this thing could get up and running, and immediately the people that impacted just by 1 year of having government support and recognition that they're important people could influence their decision to go to college, to influence the workforce in the future, to make our economy stronger.
Right.